Hey everybody, welcome back. I don't know if this is going to be apparent to all of you, there's a couple of days in between the last Flask video and this one. I was running into some bizarre problems with one of the demos that I was working with, so if anything looks randomly different or bizarre, I restarted the entire templating part of this demo, so don't get too hung up on that. But a few things to talk about now. Basically, the majority of this video is going to be a demo on Flask and templates, but there's two things I wanted to talk about. So the first one is going to be running things forever. Now, this will also apply to Ruby and our Rails projects. Basically, if we are not running a standard web server like Apache or Nginx or IIS or something like that, we're running an application that is going to be serving content, right? So you all have been running bin/Rails server, the host and the port, and that's an application that runs until you cancel it. The same is true for Flask, right? So we're going to run Python on our Flask script that we run. Or if you go kind of the other way, it's Flask run, and then you have some environment variables to tweak. There are two ways that you can make this run forever. One is a little bit easier. One is a little bit more robust, but a little more tricky if you're not used to server environments. I'm not really going to show you that one. I'll talk through it. But the first way is to actually use Tmux or screen if that's your preference. Basically, what we have to do is to create a subshell. And you've seen me using Tmux to kind of split up my screen, right? And just kind of have my code on one section, my application running in the other. That's a thing that you can basically detach and it will just keep running in the background until the server restarts, which is the robustness aspect. So if I go back to my root directory here, I've got this Flask demo, which is the new bit. All right, so I've got this simple server.py. All right, so if I run Python 3 simple server.py, it's running on port 5000. So we have to go to 5000, and here's our very exciting page, just as initial link. It's running, but once I close this, it's going to stop running because this script stops, right? Or when I cancel it, it no longer runs. There's nothing to serve this content with. What I can do is I can run, say, a Tmux session or a screen. That's another similar technology. And now I've got a subshell. And I can run Python simple server, or whatever you call your Python script. Okay, so now it's running again. And I can detach it. So I'm hitting Control B and then D, and I have detached my session. I am back to my main terminal. If I do a Tmux ls, I see, oh, there's a window that exists. And I can say Tmux attach session -t 0, where this -t is saying I'm looking for the ID of the window. And you can have more than one Tmux session. So 0, 0, and here, it's still running. Control B and then D, detached. I could do another one. I could say Python print, Python 3, sorry, print. Hi there, 658 verse. And there's that. Delightful. I love this so much that I just want to leave it up forever. Okay, Tmux ls. Now I have two windows. Tmux, attach. I can just scroll up. I want this back. Okay. Or I can detach again, right? I've basically got, it's almost like minimizing windows in a typical GUI environment. So I'm going to just go ahead and cancel out of this one and close it. Dumps me back to the main one. This one is still running. I could even close this window. Okay. It's still running. It's just a program running in a subshell. All right, so now if I re-SSH back in and I reattach my session, I will still see that up and running. So that's one way that we can have something go forever. Now, obviously, I'm doing this with Python. You could just as easily replace that with your Rails server command. So if we do Tmux ls, see, it is still there. Attach. Session still running, right? So just one of the ways we can make it persist. The issue with that is if I reboot my machine, that session will go away and it's done forever. Now, the second way that we can be a little bit smarter about this, and this will depend on your server environment. If you're running a Linux-based server, you would turn it into a service or a daemon. And basically what's going to happen is that you tell Ubuntu, when you reboot, run this command. So we would tell it basically run Python simple server or run bin/rails, server. And then that would just happen when the computer restarts. Now, that involves tweaking some system configuration files, turning our scripts into a quote-unquote service, but then you could do things like system control, restart your server, basically, kind of like you do with Apache when you reconfigure it. Not something that we're going to be getting into today, or at all, unless you really, really want me to show you that, but that's basically another way that we can handle that. And if you're running a Microsoft environment, then you're going to have to use the service manager for that. Okay, so let's finish off our discussion now on templates, which is basically styling, and let's keep going. So I've got my server running here in my shell, and I'm going to split it off. And I don't want to be on this side. Clear. Because my face is going to cover it up otherwise, right? All right, I need to show you this. So with with Flask, we have MVC, obviously, and we have a slightly different structure than we do with Rails. Now, this link that I've got here is one of the links that I said these are the tutorials that you could look at. And if you go down to Flask Templates in this one, so this is a read the docs link, basically it's going to do this President's app, which if you want experience with Flask, definitely try it out. I'm going to just use the most basic part of it rather than the entirety of it. But what we're setting up here, so there's this root folder of your Flask application. You could create a static folder, a templates folder, and then have your Python scripts, which would be your Flask files. Now, static is going to be anything that isn't going to change. So this is where you'd put your CSS scripts. This is where you would put your JavaScripts that you're going to include, images that you want to reference, things of that nature. And we refer to them in a very special way inside our template. Now, with templates, these are going to be your views. You would put just your raw HTML files inside there. So if I want to render the homepage or render the articles view, I'm going to have an HTML file and templates for that particular view that we want. And these are handled via Jinja, which is a template system, which is pretty common, honestly. And if you want to kind of go through how it works and all that, we're not going to go into great detail, but there are a lot of really cool things that you can do with it. It's pretty common with some of the various MVC frameworks. And then our Python files, again, are just whatever Flask script we're running. So if I go ahead and look inside here, so this Flask demo folder I created previously, and I'm going to start showing you what I've got inside here. So simple server is just my kind of main basic Flask script. Inside my static directory, I have a CSS directory, which has a CSS script. And there's nothing too crazy in there. It's just, oops, I forgot the name. Just styles the background to make it hot pink. I'm in an animation mood lately, so we've got our magic color here. And inside of our templates directory, we have ls, not cs, just an index.html page. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these open now. So vim simple server. And then I'm also going to open up our template. And we'll walk through this. So this script looks very, very simple. And again, if you go through that President's demo that's in there, it'll be a lot more complicated. Basically what they do is they create kind of the traditional setup where you have a main index page, or sorry, like a base page, and then you have your specific views embedded inside of it. Because like the header and the footer will always be the same, right? And the columns on the side will always be the same. It's the stuff in the middle that changes. That goes a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. In this server though, so we have two routes. So there's our main page, returns initial link, which we saw here, right? So initial link, so that's my homepage route, and I'm not running it, so it dies. Python 3, simple server, thank you. And it runs. Okay, so here's initial link. And then we also have a second route, which is going to return our render template. Now, if we want to handle that, we need to also import render template from our include line. And what this is going to do is bring in the ability to call render template, which is all we need. This is a thing with Python, by the way, if you're not familiar. You don't always include the entire library. You just pick whatever pieces you need. And what that gets you is a little bit of a lighter Python package. Like, I don't need the entirety of Flask. Or if I was importing, something scientific, I don't need the entirety of SciPy or NumPy. I just need a matrix. So just basically import what you need is kind of the theory here. Anyway, so our function here is second. So we're going to return a render template, and we're going to say, grab me index.html, and I'm passing in a variable here. Now, I could pass in as many variables as I want. I could have the variable name be a part of our route here and just pass it in as a variable in the function parameter. I'm just going to be kind of quick with this one. So if you want to kind of go deeper down the Flask rabbit hole, that would basically be the next step. And that's, again, all kind of in this guide here. So we've got our template. And now if we go, oops, wrong window, go over to our template, I've got HTML, head, and a link to my style sheet. So this is the first thing to really talk about. So in our template engine, again, Jinja, the terminology is if you have two curly braces, that is enclosing a directive for your template. So in this case, you see here's some of these curly braces, and then down here we've got curly braces. This one's easier to talk about. We'll start here. So if you recall, I passed in a name variable, right? So if we go back, I'm passing in name equals Eric. Well, lo and behold, we have a variable here, brace brace name. When I go here, /second, hello there, Eric. Okay, that's what I was passing in. Now the style sheet is a little different, and the syntax is not super tricky, but it's something to be concerned with if you are doing a lot of templating here. This is a file that is in the static directory. So we need to tell our template engine how to access it. So in order to get this, we need URL_4, and then we're saying static, and then file name equals the path to that file from the static root. So if you recall, in our static directory, I had CSS, and then inside CSS, I had main.css, right? If I had an image in there under the images directory, I would have a very similar call to spit out the image, and then it would be images/main.css, right? So basically, if you want to reference something static, it's not just, pointing it at the root of your web directory and saying directly linking to the image. You need to go and make this kind of a call. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Alrighty, so, yep, there we go. And we've got our page. Hopefully it makes sense. Again, Flask is not something we're going to spend a lot of time with because, we're not doing a deep dive into Python or other things. We'll come back to Rails and all that fun stuff, and we'll do a bit more with it. But I wanted to give you exposure to as many different ones as possible. And that kind of leads me into my last point here. So we have a ton of services that are out there that you can use for your web applications, right? This course is web architectures, meaning looking at all the different things that are available. How do you choose one, right? So let's say that you're a brand new developer at a company and you're given a brand new project because you're the new person and you have to do something neat, okay? And they say, we want this incredible, amazing web application. And it is completely up to you which framework to use, okay? How do you pick one? Do you just code it by hand in HTML? Do you use PHP? Do you go out and get an MVC framework like Cake PHP or CodeIgniter? Or do you do Ruby on Rails? Or do you do Flask? Or any of the numerous other technologies out there? I mean, hell, you could even go .NET and do IIS, right? It depends. And that the answer is always going to be for that. It depends. What are you comfortable with? Um, what are your preferences? What are you looking to get out of it? Is it a simple or complicated project? Does your business or your company or your department or your coworkers have any preferences? Right? If you're the only PHP person on a team full of React developers, maybe it's better to use React so that everybody can work together on it versus, it's a difficult question. So, what are you comfortable with? What do you want to accomplish? And what licenses do you maybe already have? Do you have a license for customer support with one of the more enterprisey Linux distributions and you get some kind of a server-side language out of that? Or are you working with Microsoft already because you're a Microsoft shop and everything is Azure, everything is, Active Directory and things of that nature? Well, might as well use .NET so you can loop in with those services. Basically, just kind of look around you and see what makes the most sense. There's really nothing wrong with one versus the other. It just depends on what you want to accomplish. Okay, so that is it for this week for content from me in terms of videos. So we've got a few homework assignments for you to get through. And what you're going to be looking forward to next time is responsive design and a touch of Bootstrap. Basically, how do we take all these really cool things that we've been making and actually make them viewable on tablets and phones and computers and Raspberry Pis and what other things do I have in here? Um, Tiny little LED screens. I don't know. But responsive means that we can resize and scale and fun stuff. Anyway, see you next time. Bye, everybody.